order arrived at the warehouse at 7:03 a.m. On a Thursday, a single pallet of bottled water, 12 cartons of biscuits, and one handwritten note from the regional manager that said only, "Process same day." Nobody who worked the morning shift at Goldcrest Distribution noticed the man in the gray polo shirt who carried the first crate from the loading bay into the stockroom. He was not wearing a Goldcrest badge. He was not wearing a name tag of any kind. He moved slowly, deliberately, the way a man moves when his back has begun to register its age. And he set the crate down in the wrong row and stood there, looking lost. The man was 53 years old. He weighed 79 kilograms. His gray polo shirt had a small tea stain just above the second button that had survived one wash but not two. His boots were clean, someone had brushed them, but the leather was split along the left toe in a way that said they had been worn past their replacement date by at least one season. He was carrying a clipboard. He held it the way people hold things they are not sure belong to them. Nobody came to help him for 14 minutes. Neoma Chica was on her second full week at Goldcrest. She had come in 45 minutes before her shift started because the bus from Kepeshi took 27 minutes on a good morning and 45 on the kind of morning where 3 passengers had to argue about the fare at the stop on Teta Corsi Road. She did not want to be late. She could not afford to be late. Not this job. She was 29 years old, 54 kilograms, and wearing the blue uniform vest that Goldcrest gave to all floor staff on their first day. A vest that was slightly too large for her because she had asked for a medium and received a large, and she had been too new to say anything. She had pinned it at the back, with 2 safety pins her mother had sent from Kumasi in a small envelope with a note that said only, "Fix everything you can fix yourself." The vest fit now, or it fit well enough. She wore flat brown shoes from the market on Circle Road that she had resold twice. The second time, she had done it herself with a kit from the hardware shop on Contamonto Lane that cost 12 cedis and had taken her most of a Saturday afternoon. The shoes were clean. She had wiped them down in the break room sink the moment she arrived. Neoma had been stacking the returns shelf. Items that had come back from the Tuesday delivery route. Dented cans, a box of tea that had a broken seal, 4 bags of flour that someone had marked with the wrong expiry label when she noticed the man in the gray polo shirt standing in the wrong row holding his clipboard like it was a question he could not answer. She set down the dented can in her hand. She crossed the floor. "Good morning," she said. "Are you looking for something?" The man looked up. He had the kind of face that had once been considered handsome and had settled into something better. A face with enough history in it to be interesting. His eyes were dark and alert in a way that the rest of his posture was not. He looked at her for a moment, and she did not look away, which surprised him. "I am trying to find where the Thursday water pallet goes," he said. His twi had a particular texture to it, a craw raised but with something foreign folded in. The way language changes when a person has lived somewhere else for long enough that home and away start to negotiate a middle accent. "D row, section 4, she said. "Follow me." She walked him to D row and pointed to the space that had been left open for the water pallet. She showed him the label system, the color-coded stickers on the shelf brackets, blue for perishables, yellow for non-food, red for returns. She explained it without being asked. She explained it the way she had explained it to herself when she was learning it 4 days into the job, reading it off the laminated sheet above the supervisor's desk at 7 a.m. Before anyone else arrived. "Thank you," the man said. "You are welcome." She started to go. "You work here?" he asked. She turned back. "Second week," she said. "Neoma Chica." "Emmanuel," the man said. He did not offer a last name. He did not offer a reason for being there. He just nodded, and she let that be enough. and she went back to the returns shelf. At 8:14 a.m., she saw him again. He was standing near the dispatch office trying to read a shipping manifest that was pinned to the board outside the door. The dispatch office was locked at that hour. The dispatch supervisor, Mr. Odum, did not come in until 8:30, and the man was squinting at the sheet with his head slightly tilted. "The print is small," Neoma said, passing with a crate. "You want me to tell you what it says?" "I know what it says," Emmanuel said. "I am checking if it matches the copy I have." He held up the clipboard. She looked at the sheet on the board, then at the sheet on the clipboard, and she said, "The reference number is different. There, yours says G0471, the board says G0417. Someone transposed the last two digits." He looked at her. Then he looked at both sheets. "You are right," he said. "It happens," she said. "Usually in handwriting." "Is it a problem?" "It could be. Mr. Odum will be in at 8:30. He has the original files." Emmanuel wrote something on his clipboard. He did not say thank you this time, but he wrote it down with care, and she thought, in the brief way she permitted herself to think about things that were not her direct responsibility, that he was the kind of person who did not waste words, but did not waste information either. By 9 a.m., she had forgotten him. If this story is hitting you the way I think it is, subscribe now, because what she did next is the part that changes everything. At 9:17 a.m., the woman from the administrative side came down to the floor. Her name was Abina Pencil. She wore her Goldcrest jacket even on the warehouse floor, a small performance of authority that the floor staff understood precisely. She was looking for the delivery man. "Has anyone seen the man from Eastern Supply?" She called out to the floor, and two people shook their heads without looking up, and one person pointed toward the far end of D row. And Neoma, who was in C row, heard the question and stepped out. "He was near dispatch," Neoma said. Abina Pencil turned. She looked at Neoma in the slightly delayed way that people look at others when they are deciding how much attention to give them. "Near dispatch or at dispatch?" "Near. The office was locked. He was checking a shipping manifest." Abina Pencil's expression shifted. What was he looking at the manifest for? "There was a reference number discrepancy. I pointed it out." He wrote it down. Something moved across Abina Pencil's face. It was not alarm, not exactly, but it was the adjacent thing, the brief recognition that a situation was larger than she had been managing it. She turned and walked fast toward the dispatch office. Neoma went back to C row. At 10:43 a.m., the shift supervisor, a man named Colade Monte, who had been with Goldcrest for 9 years, and carried that tenure the way certain people carry it, with a particular tiredness and a particular authority that coexisted without resolving, came to find Neoma. "Mr. Odum wants to see you," he said. He said it in a way that was not unkind, but was not warm either. He said it the way messengers say things when they have no investment in the news they carry. The dispatch office had 4 people in it when she arrived. Mr. Odum was behind his desk. Abina Pencil was standing to his left with a folder. There were 2 other people Neoma did not recognize, a woman in a blazer who was writing something, and a man who was not writing anything, who was standing near the window, and who was wearing a gray polo shirt. Emmanuel, he was not holding the clipboard anymore. Mr. Odum looked at Neoma over the rim of his reading glasses. "You spoke to this man this morning," he said. It was not quite a question. "Yes, sir. Tell me what you discussed." She told him. The water pallet, the label system, the reference number discrepancy. She told him in the order things happened, without elaboration, because she did not know what was required, and she had learned, from her mother, from 3 previous jobs, from the long education that certain kinds of women receive without ever being enrolled in anything, that the safest thing was to be accurate. When she finished, Mr. Odum looked at the man by the window. The man by the window looked at her. "The discrepancy you found this morning," he said. G0471 versus G0417. Did you know what that meant? "No," she said. "I only knew the numbers were different." That discrepancy, Emmanuel said, was attached to a shipment valued at 280,000 cedis. The wrong reference code would have cleared it through the wrong customs declaration, and we would have lost it inside the bonded warehouse system for 6 to 8 weeks. He paused. "You caught it before it went any further." Neoma held very still. Outside the dispatch office, she could hear the forklifts moving in the warehouse, the hydraulic sound of them, the groan of the floors, the ordinary machinery of a Thursday morning. She focused on that. "I just read what was on the page," she said. The woman in the blazer looked up from her notebook. Emmanuel said, "My name is Emmanuel Owusu Boateng." He said his full name the way people say full names when the full name is the relevant part. "I own Goldcrest Distribution. I have owned it for 11 years. Once a year I come to a warehouse unannounced, without my car and without my office, and without anyone knowing who I am. And I walk the floor to see what actually happens, not what the reports say happens. What happens." He let that land. "This is the first time in 11 years," he said, "that someone on the floor caught a discrepancy before I did." Neoma said nothing. There was nothing to say that would not be either too small or too large, so she said nothing and stood with her hands at her sides. Emmanuel turned to Mr. Odum. "Make a note of the reference number correction for the board file." Then he turned back. "Thank you, Miss Chica." She nodded. She went back to C-row. For the next 47 minutes, she restocked the returns shelf, completed her product log, corrected a mislabeling error on 4 bags of flour, the same ones from before, with the wrong expiry notation, and ate half a chin-chin biscuit from the bag she had packed in the small zipper pouch inside her work bag, which had been her Aunt Mabel's. A brown leather bag with a worn strap that Mabel had bought in 1994 in a market in Takoradi and had given to Neoma. When Neoma was leaving for Accra, pressing it into her hands and saying, without particular ceremony, "Carry something worth keeping." The bag held her phone, her lunch, 1 pen, and a small notebook where she wrote down things she needed to remember. She wrote in the notebook twice a day, once in the morning and once before she left. What she had learned, what she had not understood, what she wanted to understand. At 12:30 p.m., Abina Pencil found her again. "There's a meeting at 1 p.m., she said. "Conference room. Mr. Owusu Boateng asked for you." Neoma washed her hands in the break room sink. She took the safety pins out of the back of her vest and retucked it. She pinned it again. She went upstairs. The conference room had 6 people in it, and a whiteboard, and a view over the loading bay that made the warehouse look smaller and more orderly than it felt from inside it. Emmanuel was at the head of the table. He had changed into a shirt that had a collar, not a formal shirt, but the kind that signaled a person had crossed a threshold from one mode into another. He did not look different. He looked like the same man. He simply looked like himself in a different room. He had a file on the table in front of him, and when Neoma sat down, he opened it. "Second week here," he said. "Yes, sir. Before this?" 2 years at Teta Trading as a logistics coordinator. Before that, 18 months in procurement at a ceramic tile company in East Legon that closed. She did not offer this information defensively. She offered it the way her notebook entries were written, accurately, in order, with no decoration. Your records note that you requested a training session on the customs documentation system in your first week. The system hasn't been formally trained yet because we are waiting on the new module. I know, she said. I read the old manual. I found it in the filing cabinet below the returns desk. It is from 2019, but most of the core reference structure is the same. The woman in the blazer, whose name Neoma now knew from the lanyard she wore, was Celestine Darko, Regional Operations Director, wrote something down. Emmanuel looked at Neoma for a long moment. The reason the discrepancy would have passed unnoticed, he said, is because the person who was supposed to catch it at dispatch did not cross-check against the physical manifest. That is a process failure. We are going to fix it. But the reason fixing it matters is because you showed us it was possible to catch it, which means it has been catchable all along by anyone who knew what to look for. He paused. I want you to help us build the new cross-check protocol, he said, not because you work here, because you understood the problem before you knew what the problem was worth. Outside, a forklift groaned somewhere below. The afternoon light was cutting across the conference table in a long pale stripe. I want to do good work, Neoma said. That is all I have ever wanted to do. Emmanuel nodded slowly. I know, he said. That is why I am asking you. 3 weeks later, on a Wednesday afternoon at 2:17 p.m., the new cross-check protocol was piloted across all 4 Goldcrest warehouses in Greater Accra. It was a 2-step verification process. Each shipping manifest cross referenced at dispatch against a digital log and a physical board, with a flag system for any reference number, where the last 4 digits could be transposed into a plausible alternate code. The pilot caught 3 discrepancies in the first 7 days. One was a data entry error. One was a printing malfunction. One was a document that had been altered after signature in a way that the old single check system would not have detected. The protocol was named in the internal system as the Chica Cross Check. It was not a ceremony. It was a notation in a file that said whose observation it came from, because Emmanuel Owusu Boateng ran his company on a principle he had been holding for 11 years. What saves you should have a name. Neoma did not know the protocol had been named for her until a month after it was implemented. When Colade Monte, who had been with Goldcrest for 9 years, and whose tiredness and authority had begun, in small ways, to rearrange themselves, told her while they were both at the returns desk on a Friday morning. He said it without particular ceremony. He said, You know they named it after you. She said, I heard. He said, You should be proud. She said, I am. And she went back to work. Her mother called that evening at 8:32 p.m. from Kumasi. They talked for 22 minutes. Neoma did not tell her about the protocol. She would tell her later, she decided, at Christmas, when she went home, when there was time enough to say it properly. Instead, she told her mother about the bus route, and the chin-chin in her lunch bag, and the brown leather bag with the worn strap, how she carried it every day, how it had become as familiar as her own hands. Her mother said, Good. Carry it until the strap gives out, and then fix the strap. I will, Neoma said. And then carry it again. Emmanuel Owusu Boateng did not walk another warehouse floor for the rest of that year. He did not need to. The lesson was not in the walking. The lesson was in what the walking showed him, that the floor knows more than the reports, that the person reading the labels knows something the person writing them does not always check, and that sometimes what looks like a delivery man finding the wrong row is actually an 11-year-old company discovering that its own system had a gap that only one person, out of every person who had ever walked those floors, had thought to name. He had one photograph from that Thursday, not one he had taken. One that the warehouse security camera had captured at 9:17 a.m. A young woman in an oversized blue vest, pinned at the back in a way you could not see from the front, standing beside a man at a manifest board, pointing at two numbers that looked almost the same but were not. He kept the photograph in his office, not framed, in the folder. He opened the folder sometimes, and then he closed it, and he got on with the work. Dexter once told a reporter from a business magazine that the best employee he had ever hired was also the best test he had ever failed, because she caught what he had missed on her 14th day before she even knew the stakes. The reporter asked if he meant that as a compliment. He said he meant it as a correction. To himself. For thinking he was the one doing the testing. Some people walk into a room and see what is in front of them. Some people walk into a room and see what the room is missing. The distance between those two things, that gap, that small, clear-eyed attention to what does not match, is not taught in any training manual. It is brought. It is carried in on the 14th day of a second week by someone wearing borrowed safety pins and flat brown shoes resoled twice. You cannot train a person to see what others have stopped looking for. You can only build a system worthy of what they bring. The world is full of warehouses, full of reference numbers no one cross-checks, full of manifests no one compares, full of people in wrong-sized vests who read every label on the shelf before the shift supervisor arrives, not because anyone told them to, but because they cannot imagine doing it any other way. What Neoma carried into that warehouse was not a skill you can put on a form. It was something older than that, a particular kind of attention, trained by need, sharpened by the knowledge that nothing about your position protects you except the quality of what you do with it. She had arrived 14 days before this Thursday with flat brown shoes and a leather bag from 1994, and a notebook where she wrote down what she did not yet understand. She had come to do good work. That was the whole of it. The people who think they are testing others are often the ones, without knowing it, being shown something they needed to see. The door Emmanuel walked through in a gray polo shirt and borrowed indifference opened into a room where someone was already paying attention. He came to find out what happened on his own floors. What he found was that it had been happening all along, and the only question was whether he was looking. If you have ever been overlooked in a room where you were working harder than anyone, leave your answer below. And if you have ever been the person doing the overlooking, what would you do differently? Leave your answer in the comments. I read them. I want to know. Subscribe for more stories about quiet power, hidden strength, and the people the world walks past until it needs them most. I'll see you in the next one.